Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. I'm Mark Hamrick. I'm a broadcast journalist with the Associated Press. I'm the 104th president of the National Press Club. We are the world's leading professional organization for journalists, committed to our profession's future through our programming, events such as this, while also working to foster a free press worldwide. For more information about the National Press Club, I'd invite you to take a look at our website at www.press.org and to donate to programs offered to the public through our Eric Friedheim National Journalism Library. You can visit there, press.org/library. So on behalf of our members worldwide, I'd like to welcome our speaker and those of you attending today's event. Our head table includes guests of our speaker, as well as working journalists, members of the club who are club members. So if you hear applause in our audience, we always like to remind the general public that it's not necessarily evidence of a lack of journalistic objectivity. I'd also like to welcome our C-SPAN and public radio audiences. Our luncheons are also featured on our member-produced weekly podcast called From the National Press Club, and that's available for free download on iTunes. You can also follow the action on Twitter. After our guest speech concludes, we'll have Q&A, and I will ask as many questions as time permits. So now it is time to introduce our head table guests, and I'd ask each of you here to stand up briefly as your name is announced, and we begin from your right. We begin with Randy Jesse. He is a special projects editor with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. John Hughes with Bloomberg News, and he's a fellow member of the NPC board, and I should mention also that he's soon to take a new assignment at Bloomberg, where he will be editor of the product called First Word. Lindsay Mastis is with WUSA, and she describes her job there as a one-man band. Perhaps it should be one-woman band. She left her tambourine at home. Rod Kukrow is chief editor with Platts and McGraw-Hill. Rick Dunham of the Houston Chronicle. He is the Eric Friedheim National Journalism Library president and himself also a National Press Club president. We're pleased to have Zach Leonsis here today, and he is the son and guest of our guest speaker, and also a recent grad of University of Pennsylvania. And we can break rank and give him a round of applause. I had a great pleasure having a very nice conversation with him during our lunch, and he very much following in his father's outstanding footsteps. Melissa Charbonneau over the podium, Newshook Media, and she's doing a fabulous job this year, not only as the chair of our 5K, but of our speakers committee, and for all of that, I'll be eternally grateful. We'll move over our speaker for the moment, Bob Carden with Carden Communications, and we're grateful for his work in organizing today's luncheon, and I think he's organized more than one with our guest here today, and we're grateful for that as well. Then to Kurt Keel, Vice President of Communications with Monumental Sports, and he's a guest of our speaker, not to mention an employee. Good to have you here today, Kurt. Alicia Monday is with the Wall Street Journal, and she covers money and politics there. And then we have another new member here, Fred D'Ambrosi. He's the news director at WUSA Channel 9, and that is our head table, everybody. Well, our special guest today seems to have the magic touch. He helped AOL grow into a global internet powerhouse, after all, and he helped to develop, among other technologies, instant messaging. He turned the Washington Capitals into one of the NHL's glamour teams, which routinely now sells out the Verizon Center. He sits on the board of Groupon, one of the hottest new internet companies. Our guest also now owns the Verizon Center, the Washington Wizards, and the WNBA's Washington Mystics. Wizards fans hope that he can bring some magic to that franchise as well. Under ground rules that are not his own doing today, our guest cannot talk about the Groupon IPO specifically, or collective bargaining prospects for either the NHL and NBA. In fact, he did it once before, and that cost him a cool $100,000. I wouldn't want to have been at the kitchen table that night. Our speaker today made a fortune as one of the pioneers of the internet industry. He spent 15 years at AOL, where he was vice chairman and president. In addition to his sports holdings, he also chairs ClearSpring Technologies, Revolution Money, and Snag Films, which brings nonfiction films to a global audience on the internet. He also produced the award-winning documentary Nanking, which dealt with Japanese atrocities committed during World War II. And he's published a popular book that he spoke about last time he was here, appropriately titled The Business of Happiness. Our guest is a committed philanthropist and very involved in a number of charities, including Best Buddies, Hoop Dreams, the Sea Forever Foundation, Venture Philanthropy Partners, Youth AIDS, and others through the work of the Leonsis Foundation. He's a self-made man, the son of a Greek immigrant born in Brooklyn, New York. He's an alum of Georgetown University, and I'm told recently moved to Potomac, Maryland. As an aside, I'll tell you that I'm particularly happy to have him here today. I can thank him in person now for the kind video greeting that he gave for my NPC inaugural back in January. Through my work at AP, I've had the opportunity to interview our guest going back to the time when he wasn't a sports team owner, and I've seen him talk to children, for example, and during the Caps open house, just a very private view of that. When he wasn't aware, there was a nosy journalist hanging back, and I could see how engaged he was with those young children. Through it all, I can tell you personally, he's a class act, a genuinely nice guy, and Washington is fortunate to have him as one of our own civic boosters, and we're fortunate to have him back here today. Please give a warm National Press Club welcome to Ted Leonsis.
Thank you very much. Hope the third time is a charm. This is the third time I've been blessed to come and address all my friends here at the Press Club, and especially meaningful to have my son at the head table and recognize. Thanks for the applause, and he did graduate on the dean's list from UPenn, so I am proud of it. I was asked a bunch of questions in the greeting area about media and the state of media today, and it's an interesting time for all of you who are in media businesses, because the headlines are not positive about the industry that you participate in. I would say for the most part it's more about contraction, and you're playing defense. Yet I gave a speech a couple of weeks ago about where I see the biggest growth, the job creation, the value creation coming, and it's at the intersection of local, social networking, mobile, as we just heard, and real time. That is the space that the most venture capital and private equity is flowing into, and where most of the innovation is occurring by young entrepreneurs. Local, social, real-time commerce. The business that essentially newspapers invented a couple of hundred years ago. And so I view right now that the world is moving towards the sweet spot that people in this room invented, and it's the greatest time to be in the industry that you participate in. I also think that the higher calling that journalists have is redolent in what we've seen in the Arab Spring. I think that empowering individuals to be journalists, allowing individuals to get their messages out through mobile, be it video or text, and then through the power of your media, being able to share that, really has helped democratize the world. It's brought unbelievable, powerful change. And those are the things that we should be celebrating in media right now. And it's a shame that all day today and yesterday all I was reading about was phone hacking and the negative, the bad side. And I talk about feeding the monster. And it's a shame that the media is eating its own right now, because you have a lot to be proud of, and you've done really, really great things. And I think the opportunities before everyone in this room, because of this new media, are greater for you, and to build value and to provide employment and provide opportunities to this next generation of media execs. So I would ask all of you to look towards the good and the bright side, and not focus so much on the negative and the cheap, easy headline. I came yesterday and early this morning from the CAPS development camp. We have our rookies in town. It's wonderful to be exposed to young players. They're so full of energy and optimism, and they try so hard to make a good impression. That follows on the last couple of weeks where the Caps finished a very, very active period in free agency, where we brought in lots of new players, and all in hopes of trying to perfect and build the team that the community can be really proud of and that can define its success by bringing our community closer together and hopefully competing for and one day winning a championship. I'm very, very pleased to say that we're at that point in the franchise's development that that's all we can focus on and talk about. There's no more tickets to sell. We've spent every dollar we can spend under the salary cap in the NHL, and there's nothing to do other than to provide the fans with a team that hopefully can do better next year than it did last year. And I think there's a trust right now between our fan base and our franchise that everyone knows that that's what our goal is. Our goal is to do the best we can and provide not only great entertainment, but hopefully a way that can bring the city closer together. And I spend a lot of time thinking about the social ramifications of owning a sports team. The responsibility that comes with it is not unlike being an elected public official. I once served as mayor of my town in Florida, and so I would understand what was happening in the electoral process. I went to a couple of mayors' conferences, and the positions are not that much alike. There's a silent majority, and you worry about their needs, and then there's a very loud grouping on either side of any issue who are quite passionate, quite articulate, and an activist. And it's your job really to be able to filter what each side on a subject is saying. Bad free agent signing, great free agent signing, and filter that, but never lose sight that it's the mass that we have to be concerned with. And so I read everything I can, I research everything I can, especially about the importance of these iconic brands and what they mean in urban centers. And Washington is really an emblematic city, not only for our country, but for the world. It's a vibrant and growing city. I'm pleased to say that over the last couple of years, more than 125,000 people moved from outside of the city, be it the suburbs or outside of the city, into Washington, D.C. That is a really good sign where we had a flight away from urban centers that people are coming back in. And in our country, in the top 20 DMAs, about half our population lives. If you look at all of the sports leagues, 30 teams or so in each league, those 30 populous centers, NFL cities, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball cities, the majority of our populace lives, more than 300 million people in the country. And so they define their life. They work, they live in an urban center, and there's very few iconic establishments that define what that city is about. In fact, if you look and appraise how a city gets defined, the very first institution is universities. You think of Boston or Philadelphia, University of Pennsylvania. It's a central magnet. It's the intellectual property. It's the community building of that city. Here, we're blessed. Georgetown, George Washington, American, University of Maryland, Catholic. I mean, the list goes on. And they have longevity. Georgetown, 1789. They have this iconography of these buildings with steeples. They have intellectual property that stays in the area. There's more than 50,000 active alums from Georgetown that live in Washington, D.C. And it gets intertwined with sports. We're fortunate the Georgetown men's basketball team, which is a very, very proud institution, plays in the Verizon Center. And sports is one of the three main drivers of reputation of an educational institution. Selectivity is number one. How difficult is it to get into the school? Research dollars is second. And then usually a major athletic program. It's no secret that the better the Georgetown men's basketball program does, the more applications to go to the school, because it's like a 3-hour infomercial when a team is playing on national television. And so universities, crucial. Second is public space. Public space defines a community and enhances the lifestyle and the quality of life. There's all sorts of books about Manhattan in the early days and what a terrible place New York was to live, and until they demarcated what became the green space of Central Park. We who live here, we tend to take for granted as public space the mall. I mean, we have probably the most iconic public space in the world. I know when I was growing up, just listening to Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech and seeing all of the people congregating around the memorials was mind-blowing. I know from my children, our president's inauguration and seeing 5 million people lined up at that mall, that'll be a touchstone for them. Well, our building has become public space. The Verizon Center is a convener. We bring in 2 to 3 million people. The Dalai Lama is now at the Verizon Center. He then went and walked and spoke about world peace at the steps of the Capitol building. And so we have to protect and enhance our public space because it's a big part of the identity of our community. The third is iconic real estate. Real estate really defines cities. I always want to say the Sears Tower in Chicago, but I think it's now called the Willis Tower. You think of Manhattan, and it's the Empire State Building. It's the Statue of Liberty. The double whammy that we suffered on 9/11 was not only the loss of life, it was the loss of these iconic buildings, the World Trade Centers. That scarred our psyche. It was a plane hit the Pentagon. We take the Pentagon, which is really the biggest office building in the universe, and a plane struck that. And so real estate becomes important. When you think of Manhattan and you ask anyone, name me important pieces of real estate in your city, a top 10 mention will be Madison Square Garden. The people in New York call it the most powerful arena on earth. We have the Verizon Center, right near the mall, right near the Capitol, right near the White House. It's becoming an iconic piece of real estate. It activates local commerce. We're blessed. I went to see the Dalai Lama on Sunday. I met him. And then I walked outside and I saw one of my best friends and his wife who I hadn't seen this summer. And I said, "Oh, are you coming in to see the Dalai Lama?" He says, "No, I'm going to the Shakespeare Theater." And then my family and I dined at the Mexican restaurant, Rosa Mexicana, and then walked across the street, and there was this flea market-like of Tibetan and Buddhist books and clothing and the like. And it was like, look at what's happened to downtown D.C. because of this iconic piece of real estate. And I saw this little sign that said A. Poland Way, and we really have to pay homage to the vision that Mr. Poland had. And, you know, I've often laughed and said, it's nice that they put a sign there, but there probably should be a monument somewhere to him, because he turned around through his vision in building this iconic piece of real estate, the downtown community. The fourth is media properties. You are a part of the defining of what a community is. I was working out the other day and flipping through the channels, and there was a movie on HBO, and the movie was just starting, and the movie started, it was foggy morning, early morning, and a truck comes up and it throws a stack of newspapers on the ground, and you come into the headline, and it instantly established time, place, and theme. It was like, look at that. What other vehicle can do that in a heartbeat? You think of Washington, you think of the Washington Post. You think of New York, and you think of the Today Show and Rockefeller Center or the New York Times. You play a vital role in the definition and the defining of a community. And then fifth is sports teams. You close your eyes and you think of New York, and you think the New York Yankees or the New York Giants. You close your eyes and you think of Boston. You think of the Red Sox. You think of the Celtics, or now especially the Bruins after winning the Stanley Cup. And more and more I'm hopeful that people in D.C. will think of the Capitals and think of the Wizards and think of the Mystics, and whoever made the cupcakes. I'm not very happy. There's no Mystics cupcakes. And that's it. Those are the institutions that define a big urban center for more than half the population of our country. And it's why I say on occasion, we're kind of in this together. We're a media company and a sports team. We generate content. I guess now I can be considered a part of your community. I blog every day. Some days I get 30 to 40,000 people coming to my blog. I use technology that turns my blog post into a Facebook news feed. I've maxed out on friends on Facebook. It then gets turned into tweets. I'm not sure how many followers I have, probably 20 or 30,000 followers. So I've got a big audience. I'm generating content. The content that I generate often activates stories from the traditional media and the blogosphere. And so I'm a part of what you do, and we are in it together. And I do believe that sports plays an unbelievably special role in people's lives. We're relatively small businesses. but our psychic footprint is incredibly large. I remember being a senior executive at America Online, and we'd introduced new software that literally hundreds of millions of people around the world would use and would generate billions and billions and billions of dollars of revenue. And thousands of people would work on it. And we'd make the announcement, and the Washington Post would give us this big of a write-up. And then the Capitals would sign a backup goaltender. And there'd be like a mention on the front page of the Washington Post, and then a big story in the sports section, and then a column commenting on the signing. And that's when it really dawns on you that there is a higher calling in owning a sports team. People care about it dramatically. And in the book that I wrote and talked about a year ago here, I talked about finding the higher calling in everything that you do. And I made a comment and people laughed. I said, I don't want to make the playoffs. I don't want to win a Stanley Cup. I want to bring the community closer together. I want to make lifelong memories. And you know, I continuously am reminded about that. My son is here. I'm now the dad. My father, who was a waiter, used to take me to Jets games. Back then, a ticket was $7 a game. So, and there were 7 games a season. So it's $14 a game times 7 games. So $100. And that was my big Christmas and birthday gift. We have some seats now that are thousands of dollars. I mean, it just goes to show you the change. But we could go to games for $7 when I was a kid. And those days are the days that I remember I connect most to about my dad. And so I would go to Jets games with my father, and in 1969, the Jets won the Super Bowl. And I've told the story a couple of times, and people always laugh, but they come up afterwards and say, it's really true. So the Jets won the Super Bowl, and we played the Baltimore Colts. And I remember my dad and I calling all of our friends. It was this big moment, and 2 days later there was a ticker tape parade, and my dad took a day off from work and took me out of school, and we went to the ticker tape parade. And it was, it's like slow motion playing through my head. I seen the ticker tape coming down and the floats and Joe Namath waving to everybody, and so then life goes on. And my dad passed away 3 years ago. And 2 years ago, the Jets played the Colts, who are now in Indianapolis, in a playoff game. First time they had met since 1969. And to promote that game, the NFL channel was showing the Super Bowl from 1969. And again, I'm on a treadmill on a Saturday morning, I'm watching the game, and I start thinking about my dad, and I hit pause, and I start weeping. I start thinking about my childhood. And just as I'm crying, my wife is coming to the laundry room, and she comes in and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I'm crying. I'm going, "Joe Namath." She goes, "You're pathetic." Men in sports, I don't get it. And I said, I know what business I'm in now. I make grown men cry 40 years after the fact. And I know that if we can one day win a championship, it'll bring our community together, and it'll create those that connective tissue between fathers and sons and mothers and daughters and best friends that honestly will last a lifetime. And that is a huge responsibility and one that I take very, very seriously. I want to conclude my remarks before we go to the Q&A and ask you to take your jobs really seriously. You have an unbelievable responsibility. And I don't want to come off like I'm on a soapbox, but we do live in this real-time world where things that you write get glued into an algorithm. And the more powerful you are, the more that glue sticks onto a page. So you define what's important, what matters, and what must be truth. I had an exchange the other day with a very, very important and respectful member of the media, and it was about something that happened to me on a blog. I did a blog post right before free agency opened and said, here is my aspiration, what I think we will do today. And to be honest, I don't do my own, I write my own blog posts, but an assistant publishes them. And a second assistant who was replacing someone who was going on vacation was learning the software. And they put the post up and they found a typo and they brought the post down for 18 minutes, just learning how to do the editing. In that 18-minute period, blog posts were owner of Caps deletes post. What does this mean? Has their strategy changed? Is he out of sync with his GM? Is there a conspiracy? No, someone was correcting a typo. How about sending me an email? I respond to all my emails saying, did you know your blog post was down? And I'm concerned about it. Does it mean anything? But in this world that we live in, it was better to blog than ask. If you go to Google and you type in Ted Leonsis' deleted blog, there's like 45,000 blog posts. I mean, listings in less than a second. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But they're there forever. Those keystrokes, those words, that kerning, that typeface is there forever. And I do think, especially with what we're seeing happening in London right now, that this race to be first, this race to be different, I think needs to be put into perspective. You play such an important role in a city. What you write is seen as it must be true. And so I just ask, with all of the responsibility that I take upon myself in leading the franchises that I'm involved with, on occasion, just as I wrote in my book, tune up the empathy just a little bit, because what you say really, really matters. You're really, really trusted. And on occasion, I see some instances where I just kind of shrug and say, I don't think that was your best day. The media has this opportunity to do unbelievably great and important things. It was mentioned I'm involved with a company called Snag Films, a company that I founded under this umbrella that I call filmanthropy. Making films, using media to shine the light on a tough subject. activate volunteerism and charitable giving. I encourage you, go to Snag Films. It is the place now to get free, high-quality movies that matter. I want to celebrate filmmakers that make movies that we can be proud of. And we now have close to 3,000 films in our library. We support almost 500 charities. We try to marry the filmmaker with a charity and connect that film, which usually is being made to right a wrong, and support the charity. And you can go watch the film, and if you like it, you can snag it and then open a virtual movie theater on your blog or website or page. About 130,000 sites have snagged a film and made a virtual movie theater. And we're streaming tens of millions of films per month. And so it goes to this double bottom line of creating a business that is doing quite well because it's doing good. And at the end of the day, that's the business that I think that you're in. I think you can do your jobs really, really well, but you can also do good while you're at it. Thank you very much for the invite, and I look forward to the Q&A session.
By the way, I don't engage in a hard sell, but when you say you're part of our community, I'll just say, and we can follow up later, we would welcome you as an NPC member here if you decided that was part of something that you had time for, which I'm guessing you don't. I want to start with the media part, since that was sort of the emphasis of your speech, and we'll get to the sports pieces quickly. But I want to talk about your experience with blogging, because I think in many ways it does set you apart. And just sort of to qualify this piece of it, because this is what I've been trying to figure out, do you think it's fair to say that you and Mark Cuban are the most visible professional sports teams owners in that space? And then the follow-up would be, and if not, who else is out there? And then essentially, why do you put yourself out there in such a way as that, as to get 45,000 hits immediately thereafter?
I do it just because it's the world I grew up in, and so I find it natural to be transparent and to communicate. And there's a lot more bloggers than there are me. I laugh sometimes if I'll take issue or exception with someone in the media or a blogger says, and it's like, are you kidding? There's like tens of thousands of you, or I think there's 177 million active bloggers on a monthly basis. And me, it's my little voice trying to be heard. And I just think that in this world of instant communications that you can't hide from it, so you should engage in it. And I think it's also a sign of respect to the fan base and, frankly, the media that covers us, that I'll join the conversation and I'll talk.
Why don't more sports owners do it?
Well, I think it's generational. And I also, to be honest, a lot of the people that are expert in your field tell you not to do it. You open yourself to criticism. There's nothing that I can write that won't solicit a very passionate comment for or against. And I publish the comments. And so it's not fun sometimes to hear it, but it's out there. And so the decision I've just made is it's kind of better to embrace it than it is to make believe it's not happening.
But it obviously, let's just use the Caps as the example. It seems to work pretty darn well for this business and this organization. Why aren't other owners more willing to embrace a successful model?
Well, I think markets differ, people, personalities, technological proficiency and friendliness, differ. But I do think that it's becoming more and more accepted in mainstream. I gave all of our players a long, long time ago laptops and email addresses, and I published my email address. And that was looked at as being radical. And literally, still to this day, I get 200, 300 emails per day. Today, I got an email. Someone bought a T-shirt, and the white flecking for the team name was coming off. And so I was very concerned about it, and I responded, and he bought a counterfeit T-shirt. So here's news. Don't buy counterfeit products and blame me for the flaking of the jersey.
I'm guessing that's the headline you're hoping to leave us with today. So you talked about the Washington Post story selection, and you're able to set your own sort of digital information agenda now. Do you imagine that you feel more comfortable with controlling that space than you would have 20 years ago when you didn't have exactly that option?
Oh, I don't think I control anything. I think when you are a part of the conversation, you surrender to the audience. And if you think you can control the monster, you're being very naive. I think that, but it's better than running into the cave and waiting for the monster to leave, because I don't think it's going anywhere.
Well, someone asked along these lines, do you see yourself as competing against the likes of the Washington Post, ESPN.com, et cetera? Oh,
no, not at all. I mean, one, I'm not capable of doing that. Two, they're partners. I guess you could say we're in co-opetition. The papers would like us to be successful or do really bad things. They don't want us to be in the middle, either be great or really bad, because for whatever reason, that's where the pixels migrate. But the better we do, the bigger our audience. The bigger our audience, the bigger the media partner's audience. The bigger the audience, the more the person following that team, that franchise, that sport. I mean, we all want our words to travel far and wide. From a business perspective, well, that's really good too. The more clicks, the more pages, the more papers sold, the higher the ad rate, the more people watch on television, the better the rating. And so the monster's fed and the spiral goes up. What I will say is that I am cognizant that we are a media company. That's one of the things that we have become, and that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. We are a content company. We publish. We have a website that's very popular. My blog is popular. Our arena generates people who come in, and we sell advertising just like our media partners do. And so we're kind of in it together. And so I'm very respectful to that process. And I kind of feel it's like marriage. You know, on occasion, I've been married for a long, long time, and not every day is like a piece of cake, right? I'm sure if you all do your own personal gut checks, it's more loving than it isn't, but you get into an occasional argument. I get into arguments all the time with some of the people that cover us, but we're still married. I'm still in love. And I think that that's something that we're in it together, and there's no other option. There's no plan B to it. And so I just feel coming to the press club, blogging, answering all of my emails, talking to any media that asks is the right thing to do.
And we're grateful for that. Let's talk about hockey. You referenced the spending right at the limit of the cap. The questioner asked, do you feel like the window may not be as wide to win a cup as once thought? In other words, do you need to get it done sooner rather than later?
No, not at all. I'm sure there'll be some young players that make the team. You know, last year, the underreported story of our team was how many young players joined our team, where the year before we had the most points during the regular season, and we changed the team up. We probably took steps back because we brought in so many young players. I'm sure young players will make our team this year. I do think, and Dan Daly wrote a story today in the Washington Times that I thought was spot on, which is our young players that formed our core, led by Alex Ovechkin, we basically told them it's their time now. They're not even in their prime, and the team will make the playoffs, as I promised, 10 to 15 years in a row. That's what I believe, that there's this 10 to 15 year horizon. And Woody Allen said half of success in life is showing up. Well, you got to make the playoffs to be able to compete for the cup. We saw that this year. The other thing that was so sobering about this year and the Boston Bruins win is they went to 3 Game 7s, and at every Game 7 in the first and second round, I guess it was, the media speculated if they lose, should they terminate the coach? Should they trade the star? Should they blow the team up? And the delta between ultimate historic success and blow this team up, dump this guy, those are the emails I love. Ted, I've been thinking about this. You should dump this player. Is really small. And our belief is that if we can continue to make the playoffs and stay healthy and get experience, that one of these days it'll be us that emerges as the winner. And that's frankly all I can do as an owner. All I can do is prepare us as a franchise to be open to success. And I think we're doing that. And my feeling, we had a great off season, and the core is getting older, and we'll get there one day.
And so that helps to explain the question that someone asked, essentially, why did you decide to keep the current coach? Is because you have a belief that you have a successful recipe in place.
Well, that's something, too, that always strikes me as ironic in some fashion with the media. I have deep empathy when there are layoffs in a media property. We all do. When someone loses their job, it's gut-wrenching. The ability for someone the day after a playoff loss to just toss out, fire this person, trade that person, it's a good thing you don't own the team. And I'm not saying that. Ironically, it's you can never make in any business an emotional decision right after something bad happens. And so we're not happy that we don't have playoff success. Analytically, the coach has a fantastic record. I think the best record in the NHL during the regular season during his tenure. That's a pretty strong statement. At the same time, our team hasn't gone deep enough into the playoffs. And so we have to look as a franchise, as a protector of the asset, on would we be better off as a franchise changing a player, firing a coach? And it's not an emotional reaction. I mean, it just can't be done. And through the analytics, we thought it's better to keep the team and the franchise and the continuity together and see how we do this year. And that's how we came to that decision.
So in the broader view of the game, someone asks, will DC host a Winter Classic? And if so, where could you imagine it might be?
It's such an interesting, fun question, timely question. Last night I went to the Washington Castles tennis match, which is a lot of fun. Mark Guine has done an unbelievable job. He owns the franchise, and they play 10 matches a season, and he's built this beautiful tennis stadium that seats 2,000 or so people right down on the waterway. And so my son and I and some friends went to the game last night, and Comcast was broadcasting the game. Not a lot of programming during the week, and they interviewed me, and they said, what do you think of this? Isn't this great? And I said, it's fantastic, and I'm here to announce that we're going to play the Winter Classic right here at Castles Park. I'm glad you got the joke. I had emails this morning. Are you really playing the Winter Classic at Castles Park? So I can't say when we're playing and where we're playing, but I can make news and say we won't be playing in the tennis arena at Castles.
Very good. Very good. So on to basketball, and you can maybe get specific here. How different is it trying to build an NBA franchise versus an NHL franchise, and what are the unique challenges in trying to make the Wizards a better contender?
Well, I'll only speak in generalities because I don't have enough experience yet with the Wizards, but we wanted to follow the blueprint that we did with the Capitals, and that was to hoard young picks and prospects. And in 12 months that I've owned the team, we had 3 first-round picks last draft, with the number 1 pick in the whole draft, and then we made a trade during the year and brought in another young player as a first-round pick for a team. And then this year, we had 2 first-round picks and a very high second pick, and we've been graded. I never want to win the off-season races, if you will, but we got really good grades on our draft. For the Wizards, we got really good grades for free agent signings with the Caps, and it's no secret that I believe that the way you build generationally great teams is culturally bringing young players, training them, retaining them, developing them, and hoping that they go through hard times together and they toughen up together, and eventually they make the playoffs, and once you make the playoffs, anything can happen.
What's the message to Wizards fans who may be on the fence about renewing tickets or just don't want to fork over a lot of money, especially if there's a prolonged work stoppage on the horizon?
I'm afraid I can't comment at all.
Okay. It says you were honest about the Caps when they were rebuilding. Realistically, how long until the Wizards are back in the playoffs?
Well, basketball players come into their prime statistically younger than hockey players. And I think the stats show that basketball players reach their prime 25 years old. And hockey players, it's 27 years old. And so I just have always felt that if you have young players that have upside, and they believe, and that's another thing that I am proud of. The Capitals have become a team and a market. There's haves and have-nots, and we're now a have. The networks want to put our team on national TV games. The league wants to showcase us. Players that are free agents want to come play for us. We have a goaltender that we just signed for the Washington Capitals, Thomas Vokoun, who is not making a lot of money. We didn't have enough room under the cap. but I've played for a long time in non-hockey markets on teams that weren't making the playoffs or had a shot to win a cup. I want to come to Washington. We had the league MVP say, I don't want to leave this community. I want to double down and stay, and signed a 13-year contract with us. And so there are signposts that this is a place to be. And again, because we're in it together, the fan base, we have one of the loudest buildings in the NHL. We have the best training facility in Kettler Capitals Iceplex. We have this great dynamic city. People come and they come with their family and they walk around the arena and they go to the restaurants, and fans recognize them, and so our spiral is going up, and I'm hopeful that I can continue to keep the spiral going up for all of the teams.
I'll ask one question before we get to the sort of the ceremonial question piece, and that is, how wedded are you to the name the Wizards? And of course, everybody wants to know what the possibility is that the Bullets name comes back.
I'm not going to comment on the name. Hopefully everybody saw what we just did with the rebranding, and I couldn't be happier with the rebranding. And it did exactly what I was hoping it would do. It paid the appropriate levels of homage to the past and the good past. The team won an NBA championship. But it allowed us, and frankly allowed me, to kind of make my own way. And I have to be my own person. And so I thought we struck that right balance of respect, but also being able to look to the future. And I think the fans have responded well, and even some people in the media liked it. And so when you can do that, when you can do something that there's alignment on happiness, it's a good day.
Very good. Well, just a couple of housekeeping matters that I need to take care of first. Just to remind people about our upcoming luncheons very quickly. Arianna Huffington, CEO of, President Editor-in-Chief of the Huffington Post, and Tim Armstrong, Chairman and CEO of AOL, will be here on Friday. It's sort of an AOL week. And we'll mention that July 28th, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann will be here, and I'm happy to announce that in early November, Tom Brokaw will be here to talk about his next book. So, secondly, I'd like to present our guest with the traditional NPC gift. You already have one of these, but we figure, hey, you can have a set, and that's the traditional NPC coffee mug.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not exactly the cup I was expecting, but good nonetheless. Thank you.
Yes, but having said that, no expenses spared here, and we wanted to give you something we hadn't given you before, and that is the National Press Club baseball cap.
Oh, great. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to ask you a final question. The final question is, actually I have two final questions. One comes from Zach. You might be able to answer this one quickly. He says, Dad, can I drive the convertible this week?
Yes, son.
Okay, very good. And then, on a more serious note, so as part of your book, you talked about this. You had made a bucket list of the 100 things you wanted to do before your life is over. Have you done any recently along those lines? And what's still at the top of the list?
I went to the Olympics, the Winter Olympics. I'd never done that, and that was a fantastic experience in Vancouver with my wife. I'd like to go in outer space. I think that just watching all of the news about the shuttle and what's happening. I know the head of NASA was here not too long ago. I think it's a natural desire for humans to want to see what's up there, and I'd like to be able to do that, although my wife says, why don't you make that the 101st thing that you cross off the list? And so, the bucket list, when I sign my books, I say make your list. And the list is just a proxy for playing offense with your life and giving the time and respect to your own life. And in my companies, we hire the best and the brightest young people. And they're programmed to be successful. And if they're successful, they'll get good jobs, they'll get good grades, they'll get good jobs, they'll make money, and then they'll be happy. And we know that isn't the natural transition. And I can ask a young MBA, here's a new business idea, or develop a business plan, give me a sample income statement, balance sheet, competitive analysis, SWOT analysis, and man, they crank them out. And then I'll say, how will you know in 10 years if you're happy and you're successful? And they don't know. And so balance is important. I think we've over-indexed towards success. I think all of you should make your list. Life is short, play hard, and I look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.
How about a round of applause for our speaker today? Thank you. I'd like to thank our staff for all of their assistance, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.
Real pleasure, Ted. Thanks.
Right on time.
Hey, Zach, you got